The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual co-host and do not reflect the official policy or position of the Firearms Radio Network and or their employers. Viewer discretion is advised. This is especially true on our live shows.
Broadcast for shooters, hunters, and gun enthusiasts. This is the Firearms Radio Network. The bandwidth for this episode of This Week in Guns is sponsored by Patriot Patch Company. PatriotPatch.co.
Welcome to This Week in Guns. This show is brought to you by the Firearms Radio Network and Patriot Patch Company.
And this show offers commentary on the latest firearms industry news, information, and buzz. I'm your host, Sean Herron. And as always, my pleasure to introduce our panelists tonight. First up, we've got a veteran to the show, but also a veteran of the U.S. military, Second Amendment advocate, professional rabble-rouser, author of American Insurgent, and host of the Matter of Facts podcast, Phil Rabelais. What's up, man?
Good to be back, man. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you. Next up, first timer to the show. He is the Director of Outreach and Development for the Second Amendment Foundation. No stranger to the fight to protect our constitutional rights and face of 2A Gaming, Andrew Gottlieb. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Glad to have both you guys. Pretty excited. Lots of news to talk about tonight. Before we do, I'll talk about our advertisers. First up, we've got the Patriot Patch Company. Go check them out, patriotpatch.co. That is where you can find their Patch of the Month Club. And I know gun people love patches, and Patriot Patch Co. will fix or feed that addiction. So go check them out. And also Second Call Defense. If you have a gun, use a gun for personal protection, whether it's inside your home or carry one every day. What happens after you pull the trigger? That's what they help you with, and make sure that you don't spend time in jail if you don't deserve it. So go check them out. Firearmsradio.tv/SCD is where you can go for that. Let's get right into the stories. Victory in Virginia. The assault weapon ban fails to make it out of committee. This comes to us from Fox News and every other media organization in the universe. Yeah, we saw lots of craziness going on in Virginia. We saw people showing up. We saw a bunch of different organizations getting involved. We saw, in my opinion, unprecedented activism and advocacy. And I think it's pretty amazing. Well, it looks like a few of the Democrats crossed the aisle and voted no against it. It did not pass. They said, don't worry, we're just going to come after it again this fall. And I completely believe that. Some bad things actually did get put in, like measures that would ban guns in certain areas and buildings, universal background checks, limit how frequently people can buy handguns, and allow law enforcement to red flag people and take guns away from people they deem dangerous. So it's not a total win, but this is actually kind of surprising to me. Andrew, first time on the show. What are your thoughts here?
You know, I was actually surprised it got killed and pushed. Like, I get it, you know, the election season, you want to push it back, but it is a win for us. It shows that, you know, that rally in Virginia really had an effect.
Yeah, it really did. It was kind of surprising, actually. Bill, what do you think?
I mean, I'll call it a temporary victory at best because, I mean, like you said, they're going to come back from their bite of the apple. They always do. They never relent. They don't learn their lesson very well. I'm hoping against hope that maybe Virginia's Patriots kind of use this as a rallying cry to vote some dirtbags out of office next time around, but I don't know. I mean, to me, every time when I say we got a victory for the Second Amendment, I mean we got something back, not we held the line. This is a temporary ceasefire at best.
Yeah, I definitely don't want people to get too excited about it, just because the fight is going to continue on and on and on and on. So it's going to be interesting. This is the first battle in a much larger war, and hopefully we'll go.
Well, I mean, the thing I point out to somebody recently who said this was a victory, and I push back against it every time I hear it, is simply the fact that in order to say this is a victory, we have to first establish what the goal is. And then we can say if we made progress towards that goal. If the goal was just to hold the line, then yeah, this is a victory, but that's not a victory to me. A victory would be, let's shred the Gun Control Act, let's shred the NFA, let's get SCOTUS to finally agree with the Second Amendment really is. That would be a victory. That would be a long-lasting blow against gun control. This isn't that. This is hold the line, punt it down the road for a little bit longer. We're going to be back to fighting this again, probably in another state in a couple of weeks.
This is also just one of many, too. It's while this one didn't make it through, a lot did, and a lot of not so great stuff did make it through. I believe they got red flags through. I think one of the ones is letting cities and counties decide what their own laws are. There's a lot that's just not very good for gun owners. And so it's yes, it's nice to say, look, we have a small victory in this, but don't get complacent, I think is a great thing to tell people.
Yeah, 100% agree. Next up, this one I almost don't even want to bring up, but I just thought it was kind of interesting. It's not necessarily gun related, but an ASU professor questions the validity of psychological exams in court proceedings. Comes to us from phys.org, and it talks about some of the testing that they used in courts, and talks about how they're not all scientifically valid. It says in the article, and is quoted, given the stakes involved, one would think the validity of such tests would always be sound, but we found widespread variability in the underlying scientific validity of these tests. So these tests, and the reason I bring it up is because we see a swath of red flag laws coming across the United States, and these kind of tests, I think even anti-gun people generally want to see some kind of psychological testing in some places, which I imagine will gain popularity as it gets jammed into the citizenry of the United States here. But to have this actually come out and be like, look, these things kind of don't work, and a little bit of witchcraft, voodoo, and black magic going on here is not that surprising to me. Phil, what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, I mean, I see this from a slightly different angle. I mean, if this is going to be used in an attempt to kind of kick the legs out from underneath a gun owner, trying to convince court they're not crazy so they can have their rights restored or respected, then that's certainly one concern. But the other thing it makes me wonder is, does anybody see how this can be utilized to, because I mean, one of the psychological tests that they're referring to is like determining if a person's mentally culpable or capable of standing trial. It's quote the crazy test. Like a person can't be held accountable if they were psychologically or emotionally unable to be responsible for their actions. And if you remove all these tests from admission, you basically make it to where anybody can claim I was crazy and get away with it. There's no way to prove that they were within the right mind without some kind of a psychologist coming out and saying they were sane.
Yeah.
It's the ultimate blank check to do whatever you want and get away with it. All you have to do is say, I was nuts.
Andrew, what are your thoughts?
Well, the other interesting thing, and this is one of the things the professor said, was everything is put in court. The good and the bad. They don't separate it. They don't screen it. And so, like, one of the things I've seen, especially with lately, everyone's saying, oh, we need to have more mental health screenings for people to buy a gun. Say you go through a bad breakup, something that just, you lose your job, something that really hits you hard. You get help, which is amazing to go get help, and you get better. But the problem is, because you went, that could get you in trouble. And that creates in itself another huge problem, because you're discouraging people from getting help. We saw that with 594, when 594 passed in Washington. There's a big thing, if you had a friend who wasn't doing well, you could say, hey, let me take your guns for a bit and make sure you're doing well. And then with that law, that became illegal. You would have to go to an FFL, go through the background checks, permanently transfer the guns. Just for trying to help somebody.
I totally agree. And that's going to lead, in my thoughts, that's going to lead to greater amounts of suicides, which are going to show up in the gun death statistics that they show. And we talk about this reasonably often, that adding any kind of stigma to getting mental health help and possibly losing your gun rights for the rest of your life because you had a rough week, had a rough month, had a rough year, man, it's bad all the way around.
We see it in the veteran community all the time. Mm-hmm. There's always been a stigma around a person admitting that they're having some kind of trouble, even if it's for perfectly justifiable reasons, like I just watched a friend of mine get blown up. And there's this stigma attached to it where if you're the one that raises your hand and says, I'm having trouble, whether or not it's conscious or intentional or malicious, a lot of people do feel it is held against that veteran in the military and certainly in society. And the result of that suspicion about admitting that they need help is not admitting it until they wind up installing a skylight in their forehead. Absolutely. So, if you remove all the ability for a person to say, I need help, without that being utilized against them, you're not giving that person any ability to seek help in a responsible, mature adult way, except to just suck it up and hope for the best.
Yeah. Next story is one that I don't know, it sounded interesting. U.S. Army is developing a fabric that would render toxic gases inert. And I saw the headline and immediately had to go read it. It says a new fabric generated by Omar Farhad's lab at Northwestern University with cooperation from the U.S. Army is exactly what that is. It says with the correct chemistry, we can render toxic gases non-toxic, and mostly looks like this. They have a coating made of a molecule called MOF 808 that renders VX and Soman gas ineffective. It pulls in water from the air. It pulls in perspiration from the soldier, and kind of renders that stuff ineffective. I think that's cool as hell. Andrew, what do you think?
That's crazy. I mean, I'm a history major, so gas masks back in the day, World War II, World War I, you had to pee on them, and that was what helped you. And like, I think I'd rather have something like this than that.
Yeah. Your entire uniform pulling it instead of, just using urine for a seal. Phil?
Yeah, I mean, the end goal of this seems to be to coat Army military uniforms to be resistant to nerve agent. Because, I mean, currently you have to wear a mop suit, and the decontamination process is not trivial. The only thing I want to know is, can they please, for the love of God, put this on the seat of BDU pants to filter out MRE farts? Like, is that asking too much? Because that is certainly a toxic gas that needs to be dealt with in a barracks environment. Yeah. Can we all agree with that?
Oh, no, I feel personally attacked.
There is nothing worse than 30 men farting in an open squad bay on a high-protein diet.
Yeah, that actually sounds awful, and that's the ticket right there. Fix that, you fix so many other things.
I see wonderful applications in the civilian world.
Now, I did a quick Google search, meant to earlier, but forgot. It requires a 30% humidity to actually work. And I just looked at Iraq and Afghanistan, and both are over 80%. So, definitely going to work over there. Also, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Iran. So going to work over in the Middle East. So that's a good thing. I think that's kind of the places that we worry about it right now. What's the humidity in North Korea? I'm going to look right now.
It's interesting. Was it Syria is where they had sarin? Was it last year, I think?
Yeah.
My unit was actually like, we were spinning up for a possible mobilization to Korea right before Iraqi freedom kicked off. So we kind of changed plans.
Yeah. So North Korea and Syria, North Korea 76% and Syria 86%. So it looks like it'll work in most of our modern battlefields. Every town bails on Bloomberg. This was kind of an interesting one. Comes to us from Cam Edwards over at Bearing Arms. And lots of fallout from Bloomberg saying a lot of weird things, insulting farmers. But he was talking about the stop and frisk tactics in New York City. And it looks like this organization that he started is trying to maybe distance themselves a little bit from him, and saying that they stand on their own and they are not associated, or not associated, just that they stand on their own, and that they have their own destiny. But that just can't be true, right? Because he serves on the board. He's the national chair of a gun control of the group. And, I mean, that organization is him. It doesn't really exist. They're trying to distance themselves. And I don't know what that means, but Andrew, what do you think it means?
I mean, we deal with him a lot. I remember when he first announced his campaign, he got a great start because he used the list. You know, he had all the activists and stuff, and a lot of them were like, wait, this isn't what we signed up for. You know, this was just about single issue, and that's it. And that's, you know, we deal with that as SAF. It's a big deal to stay single issue, not alienate people. But I mean, seeing more and more of the things he said, I just am blown away by he's so out of touch. I'm actually really happy he's in the debate tonight, because I think it's about time people get to see it and see who he actually is. I think totally random, but my favorite comments recently, I heard him speak talking about how he wanted to tax the poor so they'd live longer. And I was like, well, I'd rather have more money than poor.
Yeah, I'm here for a good time.
He's so out of touch with things.
Not a long time. Yeah, this guy, he scares me. I think he's probably the most totalitarianist politician we've seen in a long time. Phil, what do you think?
I'm engaging my language filter for your benefit.
Bleep bloop. Boop, boop. Andrew, you got that beep ready?
Yeah, he won't need it. I'm going to control myself-ish. Bloomberg is a tool. The man's hands a friggin' elitist prick. I don't know if I can get away with saying that on YouTube. I don't care anymore. He's a dirtbag. This is a man who very obviously, through his actions and words, looks down his nose at all the rabble and all the poor and washed masses who can't defend themselves with guns because they're not smart enough. Minorities can't be trusted with guns because they commit crimes with them. The poor can't be trusted with guns. That's why it costs an arm and a leg, and you have to know a politician and possibly do favors for one in New York to get a friggin' firearm. There's nothing about this man that's complimentary. So the only thing I'm really curious about for the people who actually think that's a guy that's a good presidential candidate is what exactly are you voting for? Because if you're voting for a guy who is like the epitome of the friggin' rich white male 1% that a subsection of the country claims to hate, what the hell are you doing voting for him? Because he is the epitome of that. And I can't understand like how in the world any group of people gets behind that man. On top of the fact that on the Second Amendment, he's a complete and total idiot.
Yeah. Some of the polls I've seen, they're not really getting behind him. Didn't they have to change the rules of the debate just to get him in?
That's how you know you're winning.
That's part of it was I think like you had to have a certain number of contributors, but he refuses to use anyone. All I have to say is let him waste his money. If he doesn't put that money towards guns, I'm happy.
Yeah, I mean, his personal wealth is worth $55 billion, if I remember the number I saw earlier. But yeah, I mean, it's good to see someone who's so crazy that even every town doesn't want to associate with him.
But like you mentioned about being like really specific to a single issue and not letting yourself branch out too much where you start to lose your potential audience. If this guy would just shut his mouth and stick to let's ban the guns, he'd probably have a decent amount of support. But when he starts talking about stuff like stop and frisk, which regardless of how you feel about the policy, it absolutely didn't work. It didn't have any positive effect on crime in the areas it was tried in. It's a huge abridgment to people's individual rights to privacy and free travel. And it was almost unilaterally applied against the minority community. So there's no part of his master plan to just say, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, you shouldn't mind us checking you out. There's no part of that makes sense on a rational basis. I just can't figure out why this guy has support. But I am very happy to see this lunatic get up in front of people and prove to everybody else he's as much of a lunatic as I think he is.
Well, he was he's sending messages to a lot of the meme pages to have them paying them to make memes to make him seem cool. Like, I don't think that he has a lot of support. And I think it's very much because people see and recognize, like, people don't want to live in 1984, you know? They don't want to live in an Orwellian state. I think a lot of people. What's that?
Because they're for it.
Yes.
Well, the problem is, I mean, you're getting to see just how much you can buy an election these days.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk about, you think he's just going to talk about guns and stuff. I mean, Beto did that and just disappeared because, at the end of the day, people get sick of hearing about it.
Yeah.
It is low on the totem pole in the presidential election of what they want, which is why, you're seeing issues in Virginia and Washington and California where they do it at the state level, but you won't see much federally, although you might, depending on how the election goes with them having control of the Senate. We've been very lucky that the courts have been going our way recently.
Yeah. So you bring up a really good point, and it's going to take me down a rabbit hole, but I think it's a valuable rabbit hole to go down, and we can really do whatever we want. So I was having lunch with some of my friends. I was in the tech industry for 25 plus years, and I was having lunch with some of my friends the other day, and they're not gun people necessarily, but they're definitely they're freedom people. They recognize that freedom is important. They're not anti-gun by any means. And we were just kind of talking about the election and all the stuff that we were seeing. And I was like, man, it's just so crazy that all these politicians right now, all these, Democratic, hopefuls are so anti-gun, and everything they put out is anti-gun. And all three of them looked at me and they're like, what are you talking about? I was like, man, every bit of news that I see, it's all anti-gun. Like, do they even have anything else on their platform, or is it all anti-gun? They had no idea what I was talking about, which made me realize what an echo chamber, even though I try very much not to live in an echo chamber, how much I actually am living in one. Like, doing this show, I see all these news stories that are anti-gun and are associated. But these three guys that are not necessarily gun people, but not anti-gun either, they're not seeing any of the anti-gun stuff at all. So maybe Bloomberg is kind of branching out, or maybe he is too laser focused on this one specific issue that he's not even popping up on that kind of middle of the road world's radar. What do you guys think?
See, I just want to push back on the idea that you're in an echo chamber for one reason. I refer to it as the lighthouse syndrome. Like when you are the lighthouse in the dark, then you are the one showing the light to everybody else. You're the one bringing attention and focus to these things that not everybody else is seeing, because you exist in the gun community and not everybody does. So you are much more steeped and versed in this issue. But if you were truly living in an echo chamber, you don't need to be talking to the two of us, and you wouldn't go talk to your friends who aren't in the gun community. So that's what I tell people a lot of times, is I say the difference between being in an echo chamber and being a lighthouse is going out into the people who don't live and breathe this and telling them about it. Because, I mean, I work in an extremely liberal workplace where being a libertarian, I'm probably like one of about 4 in 1,000 people. Just a really, really, really minority, and I accept that. But when I talk to some of these people about gun control laws, whenever gun control gets brought up, and like I show them a picture of the AR pistol I built, and I'm like, hey, you see that thing right there? Yeah, that thing looks like stock. It's not a stock, it's a brace. And I start explaining to them like all the intricacies of the NFA and how stupid and capricious our gun laws are. And within 5 minutes, I win them over to my side of the argument. And they all say that is stupid. And I'm like, that's what your politicians think makes sense. So don't be in an echo chamber. Be a lighthouse.
I like that.
And that's what you're doing. You're going out into a group of people who aren't living and breathing this. And you're telling them, this is what I see.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting. Now, Andrew, I mean, from the gaming community, which I think you and I were talking a little bit before the show, historically votes reasonably Democrat, but does get out and vote. Like, what do you think about that? What do you think about that guns being so important to all of us, but maybe not on other people's radar?
It's just not, it's not something a lot of people think about. You know, obviously I grew up in this industry, and my experience through guns was actually through video games. You know, I was a competitive player. It was something I enjoyed doing. So like when I turned 16, could go to SHOT, I was super excited to see all these things. And my parents were like, where the heck did you learn about this? We don't have any of these. Like, where did you? And I was like, I knew everything, knew all the manufacturers. I knew more about hardware than they did. And it's that. So you have that branch in, but at the same time, when you focus on other issues, you know, when you make it, I mean, we saw this, you know, when you bring in super conservative politics to the gun issue, not everyone's happy. We work with a lot of different groups, you know, Liberal Gun Club, Pink Pistols, Armed Equality, Operation Blazing Sword. You have NAGA. You have all these different groups that are so diverse for guns that not everyone's going to agree on every issue. But if you can find a way to get everyone to agree about guns, there you go. You know, you protect it. If you can make, like in Virginia, you know, you had Democrats vote for technically on this one thing, you know, they took the pro-gun side. If you can have more Democrats be pro-gun, that's a win for guns. If you don't have to worry about your Second Amendment rights, I mean, that's huge. And that forces politics to change from this whole partisan system. You know, it's always an issue. I thought it's not partisan. It shouldn't be partisan. And unfortunately, it's become that. And it sucks because it's very easy for a lot of politicians to say, look, we need these laws. We need these laws. They're going to fix everything. And it's like, these laws exist. We don't enforce them. You're literally just lying to people to try and make them feel like you're doing something when you're doing absolutely nothing. And that's horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, we look at Parkland's a great example of it. It's why was nothing done before? And even during, nothing was done. And that's just appalling.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. It's an interesting time. Phil?
Well, just the idea that government that has been the root of the majority of the problems we faced in the 20th and now the 21st century can somehow unscrew themselves long enough to fix the problems they've caused. You're going to have to sell me beachfront property in Arizona before we talk about that purchase.
Yeah. And you mentioned Parkland, and that's the thing is like they're trying to throw all these red flag laws in and using Parkland as an example. I'm like, that's the worst example ever because he had multiple contacts with law enforcement, FBI, everything before that happened. So how do we fix existing laws by adding more laws when the existing laws don't even work? I don't even get it. It's kind of ridiculous. But I've always said, and I've said it on this show, I've said it on all the other shows, that it's not even really about convincing people that guns are the answer. It's getting people to care about themselves and convincing them that their life is more important than someone who should wish to take it from them. Because once you convince them of that, once you convince them that the police are not there to protect them, that the police are not going to show up and come save them if something bad should happen. I mean, it does happen. I'm not anti-cop at all. But ultimately, they're there to investigate your death if you have a home invasion or something like that, unless you get through it and come out on the other side. So it's about convincing people that their lives are important and that no one else should be able to take it from them, because eventually, once they believe that, they'll get to the guns, because that's the best way to defend your life.
Well, it's also about convincing people that no one has a responsibility to defend you or to care for you or to manage your existence other than you.
Yeah.
It's the reason why I started a prepping show and not exclusively a gun show. From my perspective, we all have a responsibility to manage ourselves. We all have a freedom to manage ourselves and our own affairs. And where politics are concerned, like, I'm an outspoken libertarian and I make no bones about that. But I always tell people I will vote for the person who's going to leave me the hell alone, because I am capable of defending myself and my family. I'm capable of feeding my family, and I'm capable of caring for myself. I don't need the government, a 3-letter agency, or a local police force to come and investigate my death after the fact. What I need is an AR-15 and 2 30-round magazines to put down a threat before it hurts me.
All said. All right, all that Bloomberg talk, I need to get his name out of my mouth. So we'll talk about something cool. DARPA wants $13 million for an unmanned flying gun. I don't even know. This is an awful article, and I almost skipped it, but it made me laugh. It's from the New York Post. So clearly there's no actual reporting that goes on. But DARPA, the government agency that birthed the network that became the internet, is asking for $13.27 million in its 2021 fiscal year budget for the so-called flying gun. They're affectionately calling it the Gunslinger, and all of this will go towards propulsion, munitions, sensors, GPS, and communications. It's like a Warthog without the A10, right? Kind of cool, right?
Crazy. I thought it was Al Gore that came up with the internet. It wasn't?
Well, no. I mean, yeah, him and Vint Cerf, but Vint Cerf doesn't matter.
That's crazy. Actually, there was a video going around social media of like the Iron Dome, and seeing that and seeing how accurate it is and efficient it is with literally you just flip a switch and leave it. That's amazing to me. And anytime you can, take the idea of having soldiers in harm's way out of the equation, I'm happy.
Totally. Is that the Israeli defense system?
Yeah.
Yeah. The Iron Dome. Yeah. I saw some video of that recently. It was amazing. Phil, do you have a lot of faith that DARPA will spend this money effectively?
Yeah, the same faith I do. I tell you what, I will sign off on giving DARPA $13 million to develop a friggin' like $500 hard drone with a Glock strap to it, right as soon as they figure out where they lost $1 trillion. Let's start with that.
You ever feel like?
But in all honesty, this just sounds like taking all the fun out of stuff to me. I mean, why the hell would I want to let a drone run around blow stuff up? That just sounds boring as hell.
I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of freaky. Like the thought of like these autonomous drones or even man-controlled drones kind of flying around with guns. Like, I think it's the future of warfare, right? Like it takes our troops out of harm's way, but it's also, it's tough.
I'm gonna disagree with you on that, because here's the thing of it. Currently, if there's a bad shoot in a military theater, who gets blamed for it?
Us.
Who do you blame if it's an unmanned drone?
Us.
Mm-mm.
Whoever you want to blame.
The problem is that from a legal perspective, and I know that there's like a chasm between like civilian law and UCMJ and military tribunal and all that. But I mean, we haven't caught up legally to our technology yet. Like, there's this huge gap between who's responsible when the unmanned drone blows away a bus full of civilians. There's no legal precedent for that. And the law and our nation are not prepared, I don't feel, to put that ability into the hands of unmanned drones, simply because we're not that trusting yet. And Izzy Long pointed out, that's Skynet. That's a hunter killer getting developed right now.
Yeah. And I literally just watched Terminator Dark Fate or whatever last night. No matter what.
The other thing is, you look at cybersecurity, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
We already have, hacking is such a big deal. What happens if another country hacks that and causes some, like you said, in court, that just turns into something crazy.
Well, wasn't it a year or two ago, the Office of Personnel Management for the federal government got hacked? Nobody knows who it was. Millions of Social Security numbers, DDT information, home addresses for current and past federal employees all exposed.
Yeah.
And down here in New Orleans, we recently got hit with an episode of ransomware. Some freaking knucklehead city employee opened a friggin' email and got the city's entire system locked down with ransomware. But yeah, let's put a friggin' machine gun on a friggin' unmanned drone. That sounds like a phenomenal idea.
Next,
I'm going to go buy more cans of ammo just to be safe.
Next up, pair of Kansas teens arrested with over 80 IEDs were allegedly selling bombs. People were reporting that they were hearing explosions nearby. This is Hutchinson, Kansas. And on February 8th, authorities got a tip that someone was driving around with a truck full of IEDs. So my guess is these are like pipe bombs, stuff like that. Anyway, they did some investigative work and found out who owned the vehicle. They located it. Traffic stop was initiated. Inside, they found two 18-year-old men who had more than 80 IEDs, with air quotes, with them, and a plastic tote full of bomb-making materials, as well as 82 bombs that had already been assembled. The chief of police says that the ATF considered them to be IEDs. 72 of them were the equivalent of a quarter stick of dynamite. 10 of them equaled a half stick of dynamite. They're kind of making them, selling them to people. And I don't know, man. Like, I guess I don't care because this is kind of how I grew up. Like, we were living our best life. That's kind of what we were doing. Like, these guys they're probably going to do jail time, and not a small amount. Yeah. Andrew, what are your thoughts on this one?
I would just be curious. I was, I guess, reading it, I wonder what they're doing with it. Is this like Tannerite targets kind of thing just for fun? Or is this, what was the intent? It's so obscure that they would just be making a ton of bombs.
Yeah.
Like,
So
I don't even know how to wrap my head around that.
yeah, they were, let's see, the ingredients were here. They had
Potassium chloride.
Yeah, potassium. Yeah. Potassium chlorate and aluminum powder. They were ordering it. They had fuses. Like, my God, like I did stuff like this as a teenager with no malice intended, but it's also an interesting juxtaposition of like when I grew up and what time is now. Like when I grew up, it would never be thought that, oh, they're doing terrorist activities. It would just be like, oh my God, they're so stupid. But now it could be like terrorist activities. It's just like that weird, I don't know, the paradigm has shifted in this country. Phil, what are your thoughts?
Okay. Let me preface what I'm about to say by saying that I'm the libertarian in the bunch. I think you should be able to own, hand grenades and machine guns, all that kind of stuff. Like everything that really scares the hell out. Here's the thing of it. I am that gun person that scared the hell out of anti-gunners because most people in the gun community are okay with like small restrictions. And I'm not. I'm the one that is way out in left field that thinks that we should have crew serve weapons in our living rooms for home defense firearms. I'm that person that scares the hell out of other people, even in the gun community. I don't see anything wrong with these people having pipe bombs, hand grenades. I don't see anything wrong with it. I am very curious, honestly, about the intent, though, because like if they'd made threats or if they were blowing up other people's property, that's problematic. We should probably give them a good smacking on the behind and stick them in a jail cell with a very large, angry inmate and let, the justice system sort them out for their iniquities. But if all they were doing was like blowing up stumps and friggin' horsing around, I mean, what the hell is the problem? Because you can legally mix up a batch of tannerite big enough to blow up a refrigerator, and there's nothing wrong with that. So how is this any worse? This is one of those moments where the law is applied in such a way that rational people, which by the way, don't read those comments because it'll give you eyeball cancer.
I did not.
People look at this situation and say, maybe cut the kids a little slack. They were just being kids. But like seriously, read through the freaking comments and everybody's talking about, okay, you have one person who seems reasonable who's talking about, wow, it's pretty resourceful. These kids could build this stuff. And then you have all these other people that are, it looks to be about half and half. Half the people are screaming, lock them up for life. And the other half are saying, who the hell cares? I just think it's funny that they're actually going to charge these kids with like federal friggin' explosive charges. And they're calling these things IEDs. And it's like, well, a quarter stick of dynamite? We used to play with fireworks more powerful than that.
The terminology to IED that carries such a negative connotation is in, this is something that's going to be on the side of the road and killing people.
That's intentional. Trust me.
When you were making stuff like this, Sean, were you doing it in that quantity though?
No, but dude, if I would have realized people would have bought this stuff, yeah, I would have. we were just like kids.
I guess that's my point though. It's like, the hell are these idiots doing with any of the damn things?
Yeah.
Like, how many friggin' stumps do you have to clear on your property, Junior?
Look, these are entrepreneurs.
Oh, I'm wholeheartedly about that. I just, like I said, I'm funny about that kind of stuff. And Benjamin Allred can kiss my behind. Yes, I'm a libertarian. I'm going to put it on the wall behind me so I don't have to say it anymore.
No, I kind of read this and I was like, I mean, my friends and I, we literally bought a car for $200 specifically to just drive it until the wheels fell off. We would find dips in town and then go over them at 70. And then when we messed up the car beyond repair, we drove it off a cliff and then we just left. Like, we weren't terrorists. We were just idiots.
But there was a time in this country where, like, a reasonable judge would look at the situation and say, I'm throwing this out. This is nonsense. Like, these are just kids being kids. But now they're applying the letter of the law in contra to the intent of the law. Like, the intent of the law is to not allow people to develop explosives that they could or will use to harm other people, not a bunch of kids just fooling around.
Yeah. Go ahead, Andrew.
I was just, it seems like it's like Tannerite or something like that. It just community service kind of thing. I can't even. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they had ill intent. I don't really know. And I read the article twice just to kind of make sure I wasn't missing anything. It just sounded like kids being dumb kids, like teenagers being dumb teenagers. Like, I was that kid, and no one got hurt. I still have all my fingers. But it could have gone another way. But yeah, IEDs, the connotation of that was tough for me to stomach in the context of this article. This next article, guys, is an interesting one.
God, I was hoping you'd get to this one.
Leftists defend their soon-to-be-released movie that depicts killing deplorables Stalin style. There was a movie from when I was growing up called The Deadliest Game, and didn't it have Ice-T in it? And basically it was like they would go kidnap urban people, like poor urban people, and then a bunch of white rednecks and hillbillies would kind of hunt them. And this is a movie called The Hunt, and it's kind of very similar. It's elitist, leftist, rich people that go find, I don't know, from the trailer that I watched, right-wing people and hunt them. And this article from AmmoLand, and it's from Fort Collins, so my guess is Duncan wrote it. They're pretty upset about this. It says Hollywood's leftist elites are piously defending their soon-to-be-released film The Hunt, falsely calling it satire. The film is a vivid manifestation of leftist Hollywood's constitutive aspiration. And when I watched the trailer, I'm like, okay, so the leftist people are hunting the right-wing stereotypes. But my guess is that eventually the right-wing stereotypes are going to overcome and get out of it if that's how it's going to go. I really don't know, but I don't know. I think it's much ado about nothing. What do you guys think? Whoever wants to go first.
Do you want to take it? I personally just don't care.
I think this is like a great big old I don't care. Although on the other hand, if there are leftists out there that want to hunt conservatives, don't friggin' tease me.
That was my thing. I was like,
don't give me a crate full of full auto guns and ammo and then come to my house talking crazy, because I'm not going to be peeing on myself. That's for sure.
Is it a short? Is it a 7-minute movie? Because that's what would really happen if you give a bunch of like gun people and try to hunt. Like, I don't get it. Andrew, you said you're just like, you don't care, right? That's kind of how I feel.
You wonder why our society is so divided and so angry. I mean, you do things like this and you profit off of it. It's no surprise to me. I get why people are upset, but at the same time, it's like, why waste your time with this?
Yeah.
Keep scrolling if it bothers you, in other words.
Yeah. That's kind of how I feel. I watched the trailer and I was like, man, I kind of want to watch that movie. Like, I watched the other one.
See, I saw the trailer and I tuned it out because to me, I mean, first of all, has everybody seen that? Everybody knows who Matt Best is, right?
Yep.
Okay. Everybody's seen that goofy little skit they did about how it's a bunch of the gun guys and military guys sitting around, and then there's a home break-in, and they're all like running around, high-fiving each other and fist pumping and getting the freaking machine guns and everything out of the closet. When I didn't see that happen, when they stumbled upon the crate full of guns and ammo, I was like, this is BS. Because that is exactly how a bunch of gun guys would react. Be like, I get to play with the full autos today?
Yeah, I am not upset at this movie. Like, I don't care. I don't remember a big, huge urban youth revolt when the Deadliest Game came out. I just, like, I don't care. I feel like all the time, everyone's just trying to make such big things out of nothing. Like, this is nothing. I will go see this movie when it comes out. And it's probably going to suck.
Well, it's like, what is it? The Purge movies that people love to see. It's like the same thing. It's Hunger Games. It's all this same story, just different characters.
Yep. All right. Dems proposed gun record restoration and preservation act that would create a national gun registry. This comes to us from The Truth About Guns. And okay, this one is kind of interesting. So let's see. It would repeal the following TR provisions. So it would end the prohibition on ATF from releasing firearm trace data for use by city, states, research litigants, and members of the public, and the requirement for the FBI to destroy all approved gun purchaser records within 24 hours of approval. That's your 4473. They're required to delete it from their system within 24 hours. In the provision that makes it extremely difficult for ATF to retrieve firearms from prohibited persons who mistakenly sold guns or from gun owners who, and there's a lot of this. In the prohibition on ATF requiring gun dealers to submit their inventories to law enforcement, in the prohibition of public disclosure of data on multiple handgun sales, as well as gun sales information dealers are required to keep. And then the next article is the ATF has proposed 4473 changes that would make a national gun registry easier to accomplish. And in this one, let's see. Here's what we know. ATF agents have used annual inspections to electronically record the content of Form 4473s being kept by federal gun dealers. There was a software company that has a system where the ATF can just take the contents of a dealer's bound book by simply capturing them on a thumb drive. Two interesting articles that are not necessarily related, but yeah, like, I think that's very bad. This is a de facto gun registry. We have the laws that we have in place for a reason. We don't want this, Andrew.
Well, so I actually got emails, and this is where my head goes. It's a registry. It's the one thing that, everyone doesn't want, everyone's afraid of. But I mean, I got emails last week, I think it was, out of California, a sheriff letting people know, hey, somebody just did a request for the concealed carry holders with your addresses. We had a newspaper publish people's addresses.
Saw that.
That's ridiculous. That is an invasion of privacy. That is putting a target on someone's back. You are asking for something to happen by doing things like that. And that will get misused. It will get held against people. And it's, one of my biggest challenges is in doing what I'm doing is getting people to admit they own guns. A lot of people are like, none of your business, whatever. And I get that because the backlash that people face is ridiculous. It's you can't wear gun things in public. You can't talk about guns without people saying something or calling the police on you. It's gun culture it's being dissolved, and this is only going to make it a heck of a lot worse.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts. So they're trying to put the names of gun owners on the same page as the identifying information of the gun. I really don't want any of this, especially the act that I mentioned previously. Phil? I love every time I go to you, you're like squinting like I gave you Forrest Whitaker eye.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing about this that surprises me because, the forces that are trying to ban guns have been after a registry for as long as I've been alive and then some. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out why, because historically, and you can argue this point, but you can be wrong, historically, registration's always led to confiscation. It's always been used to facilitate confiscation. In every nation on this earth, it's been done. It has resulted in gun confiscation. And what follows shortly after gun confiscation is people getting shoved into freaking boxcars. And anybody that wants to argue that point, you are freaking wrong. Go get a history book, pop it open, read it for a couple hours, come back and talk to me when you have a little bit of an education in the subject. Until then, buzz off. But honestly, this is the other thing I point out, and this is where the tinfoil hat can go on top of everybody's head. Does anybody really believe that those 4473s do get purged out of the NICS system? Because I don't.
Yeah, I want to believe it.
There's no scenario on earth where we self-identify ourselves to the to the FBI, and someone somewhere along the way didn't get it in their head, I know it's illegal, but I'm going to do it anyway. No one can convince me otherwise, because I've seen our government do way too much shady stuff. Anybody that hasn't like really dug into all the claims that Edward Snowden made about what the NSA is doing to keep tabs on people, you really should read into that. It'll scare the hell out of you. But I guess my point of view is like, I think the government already has a gun registry. I don't think they're admitting it. I think this is probably just to like be able to remove the curtain so everybody can see Oz finally. Because once they remove the legal roadblocks to it, they don't have to hide it anymore.
The problem there is you're assuming that they're good at their jobs and efficient. I mean, I see it as more paperwork that nobody wants to deal with. I mean, Nix is already such a mess as is.
See, here's the thing, though. You don't have
Even
to
if
be
they
good.
didn't shred them, I doubt they could find them.
The thing of it is, though, is that Nix is at its heart an electronic reference system. You don't have to sort it. You don't even have to be good at your job. You just have to make the system record. That's what I'm saying. I mean, from an IT background, this wouldn't be that difficult to cause Nix to suddenly record and keep records. True. It really wouldn't. It'd be illegal.
Like somebody would have hacked it by now and gotten it out, though.
Maybe. So let me say this, that having been in the firearms industry for a bit and working with a lot of dealers and other stuff like that, I can honestly say that when we get called, or when I've been involved with people, dealers getting called from the ATF to track down guns, or local law enforcement to track down guns, it has always been kind of exactly what they propose it would be. It's never been easy. It's always been they find out from the manufacturer who they sent it to. Then the wholesaler will tell them which dealer they sent it to. Then they call the dealer, and the dealer needs to go through their 20 years of 4473s and pull it up and find it, and then report that back to them. Bill, I'm with you. Like, I don't believe for 1 second that they get rid of things like they should, but I can say that at least 3, maybe 4 times now, I have seen my friends or people I'm associated with have to track this kind of stuff down because those guns go. Again, I wouldn't put anything past, the government or the bureaucracy that they would just do that unless they actually needed it, and then they could just go pull it up and search the database. But I mean, at least they're keeping up appearances at this point.
Doing a phenomenal job of that, by the way.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. Definitely this bill, the Gun Records Restoration and Preservation Act, that's just straight. Look, we've all seen Red Dawn. And I'm not saying that it's a documentary, but it could be. And they use 4473s from gun dealers to find local gun owners so they can track them down and make sure that they don't start an insurrection or an uprising. So take that for what it's worth. Let's see. Pennsylvania, this from I'm offended, and this one offended me. A Pennsylvania school called police on a 6-year-old Down syndrome student who pointed her finger like a gun. All right, so this is a 6-year-old Down syndrome girl. I have volunteered with Down syndrome people pretty much my whole life. I've always had association with them throughout my whole life. She pointed her finger like a gun, and she actually did say, "I shoot you." They took her to the principal's office. The principal convened his whatever it is, like a group of people that will kind of take a look at the situation, figure out what it was. They decided it was no danger to the teacher or the classmates, but instead of dropping the incident, after they did the threat assessment, they called the police. They called the police department, provided authorities with the personal information as well as information about the incident. And are you kidding me? This is when everything just goes haywire and when everything's just ridiculous and stupid. Andrew, am I just overreacting? Is this as dumb as I think it is?
Was it Pop-Tart gun? It's literally the same thing as that.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah.
Legos have guns. Video games have guns. There's guns everywhere. And that's ridiculous. Like, regardless of anything, a kid that age, I can't even wrap my head around it. It's the culture thing. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's wanting to make an example out of everybody so that you just control everyone. And I feel so bad for the family.
Yeah.
And her, yeah, the whole thing is ridiculous.
The principal thought that it wasn't an issue. The little threat assessment group that they put together said that, she didn't mean to harm anyone. But then boom, they call the police. Like after all these things, Phil, I know this one's going to give you Forrest Whitaker eye.
I agree with Andrew. I really and truly think at this point that what they're after is an attempt to freaking demonize anything relating to firearms, push gun culture underground. I mean, hell, my daughter's 7, and I've had to have multiple conversations with her about, we don't tell anybody outside the family we own firearms. We don't tell anybody where they're stored. I mean, she knows where they're stored just because I can't completely hide where they are in this house, but they're all secured and they're out of her grasp. But like, I have to tell her over and over and over, I'm like, these things are not open to discussion with people outside the family, because I can't send her out into the world and second guess who will and will not pull some nonsense like this with my child. And I'm not emotionally prepared to have to deal with a police officer questioning my 7-year-old.
Yeah.
Phil will go to prison. Phil will lose his mind.
I'm curious how the police reacted to this.
Yeah, like
I don't know many cops that would take it seriously. Once they showed up, they'd probably be upset they were called.
It depends, though. You say that, but in certain precincts, I could totally see a cop taking this seriously, because, again, it comes back to what we were saying earlier, where you apply the letter of the law rather than the intent of the law. Like the intent of these rules is very obvious, but when you applied something like this, a 6-year-old, especially one with a learning disability, like no one with common sense could look at the situation and say, "Yep, that's a good idea, a good job, everybody, top to bottom, y'all did a good job on this one." Everybody with common sense is in the corner, horrified that this 6-year-old is traumatized over this incident, and the parents, I hope, are as upset as I am. Like, this didn't even happen to my kid, and I'd love to freaking choke somebody over it. It's just, it's maddening. It's frustrating.
Yeah. So, guys, Arizona's gotten a little bit cray-cray. They're seeking to ban all semi-auto rifles. They have filed a bill. It's Senate Bill 1625. 2 notable standouts, ban on assaulty-looking guns. Let's see. So, it includes all semi-automatic rifles that take detachable magazines that would become they become assault weapons, and almost all rifles with fixed magazines of greater than 10-round capacity. Let's see. So they define large capacity magazine means any ammunition feeding device with the capacity to accept more than 10 rounds, but does not include any of the following: a feeding device that has been permanently altered so it cannot accommodate more than 10 rounds, a .22 caliber tube ammunition feeding device, a tubular magazine that is contained in a lever action firearm. They get a little bit pedantic on the verbiage here, but can you guys believe that they're trying to pass this in Arizona, Phil?
I can believe it. I mean, look, the state by state attack on our rights, it shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. The fact that this got proposed in Arizona, it should be no more surprising than if it got proposed in Texas or Louisiana, for God's sakes. I mean, I've said it before. Every state, regardless of how red or right, if you want to use those terms, or how pro-gun they are, every one of them has at least one major metro area packed to the gills with a very high population density that, going by the averages and statistics, usually leans more towards being anti-gun. That shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. So the fact, if anybody's surprises happen in Arizona, go check in on your state politicians to see what kind of nonsense they're brewing up behind your back.
Yeah. Because
you will be as surprised as people in Virginia were when things start getting passed, and you wonder where this come from. It's been there simmering under the surface.
The good thing is it was killed. At least it's not something that has to be worried about. It's not making it anywhere.
Now.
No, it's the state groups have done a great job down there. But it's just the idea that these keep getting proposed, and, all it takes is, one more incident where somebody ruins it for the rest of us, where it's the perfect time to push things through when people aren't thinking.
Yeah.
And that's the issue. Okay. We can only fight them for so long.
Yeah. And they're just coming, Kentucky, just all these places that you would never suspect to see stuff like this. It's just, they're making this nationwide push. Like, Virginia was definitely good, but we have to remain vigilant. And I will tell you this right now, that there's not a whole lot of states, in my opinion, and my current assessment of 2A support in this country, there's not a whole lot of states that are going to end up like Virginia. There's not a whole lot of states that are going to have that kind of advocacy going on and activism. Like a lot of people, like Colorado, 2013, July 1st, 2013, the mag bans, or the, what they call it? I don't even remember what they called it, but anything over 15 rounds, like, that shocked all of us. Like, Colorado's the old West. But of course we have Fort Collins, Denver, and Boulder that kind of, because of gerrymandering, that have guided our political process here. Just 3 dots of blue and a sea of red. So don't think that your state is safe, because at this point, no states are safe. Constantly be contacting your lawmakers and politicians to make sure that if they don't follow the will of the people, that they will be out on their butts. Andrew, is there any other stories that you really wanted to cover that you were super interested in?
Yeah, adding to that really quick. I mean, that's why SAF does what we do. You know, we don't lobby. We go in the courts. We get everything done in the courts so that, you know, when they propose something like, hey, we're going to ban gun ranges in this New Jersey town, you know, we get to say, hey, go for it. We'll sue. And here's why we're going to sue, because we've already sued on this in Chicago and we won the case. And, you know, you get to pay us our money for our lawyers, because the courts have already said, no, that you can't do that. That is a restriction on your Second Amendment rights. You know, and that's what we do. And that's what, you know, Trump has done a great job of the federal judges. You know, McConnell, as much as people don't like him, you know, they've gotten these judges through in the federal courts to the point where we're going to be pushing a lot of lawsuits and having success at lower levels. Mm-hmm. So we don't have to worry about the Supreme Court actually taking it. But yeah, you brought up Kentucky, because that's one I never ever would have expected to have an issue with guns. So with the gaming thing, one of the, if not, I think it is the biggest game, and it's huge with kids of all ages. It's called Fortnite, and high school, college esports has become this huge industry. We saw a 16-year-old a couple months ago win $3 million on cable television playing this game. And Kentucky, of all places, has banned this game because it involves guns.
Yeah, I saw that.
They just came out and said it because of guns.
And it's their, like, they won't allow their schools and collegiate to participate in that, right? Or is
the high schools. Yeah, they will not let their high schools. They've threatened the company to cancel the contract with them. You know, you're creating this great environment for these kids to participate in a competitive sport across the country. And because it involves guns, they're saying no. And I mean, if I look right now, I think just on one of the streaming platforms alone, you have over 94,000 people watching people play this game right now. That's not counting the people actually playing it. And it's huge. And because it's firearms, no, kids aren't allowed to play it. And so that was a couple weeks ago. And since then, Georgia is another state on there, Mississippi, Arkansas, you know, California's no surprise. Connecticut's no surprise, but I think there's 13 states now where it's not showing up as being available because of guns. And this is part of the reason why we started this project, is trying to counteract that culture war. Because if you take guns out, you know, that's what got me into guns was the video games.
Me too, actually.
And you take that out, you force people to be afraid to exercise their rights. They're no longer going to do it. They forget their rights exist. And that's, I think, one of the strategies that the anti-gunners have figured out. In Washington, we saw it. A lot of bills passed that did absolutely nothing, and they're unenforceable. We can't even find a plaintiff because we can't get standing in court to get rid of any of these. But they will discourage you from wanting to own a gun because of all the repercussions that could happen to you.
It's a smart strategy.
It sucks.
It does. It's absolutely awful. Now, my Fortnite story is this. I got into it way late because I literally didn't play video games for like 5 years, which is crazy because I played them my entire life. I took 5 years off because I was building my other podcast, We Like Shooting, and just kind of made that my life. So a couple of months ago, I installed Fortnite because I was like, all right, yeah, I'm going to try this. So I installed Fortnite. I ran around for like 15 minutes and never ever saw another soul. And finally I saw somebody in the distance shooting, and I was like, this is it, buddy. It's you and I. We're going to go down. I ran up, I ran. And finally I came up and I shot at him and I missed. And this dude came over and he built 4 walls around me before I could even figure out where he was, and then jumped up on top of the walls and shot me in this kill box that he created, and I uninstalled it.
I can't do the building. I have no idea how these kids can even do that. It's incredible.
Dude,
my brain doesn't work that fast.
Yeah, it was like 3 seconds, man. I like shot him, and then he came up and ran at me, and he was like zigging and zagging, and I was like, all right, we got this, whatever. And then before I knew even what happened, he had trapped me inside 4 walls, jumped up on the roof, and murdered me. And yeah.
The competitive shooter games are fascinating to watch, to be as a spectator sport, just because the strategy involved in all of them, the skill involved in all of them. And people love it. It's unfortunate because you have this great thing growing that could be great for gun owners, great for our rights. And, maybe things like this will get the industry on our side and realize, oh, wait, our First Amendment rights are tied to the Second Amendment rights. And maybe we should be siding with them on some of these things, or we're out of business too.
Yeah.
I kind of think that's where we're heading with all this, honestly. Because it's like when YouTube went through the first stage of gunpocalypse, and some of the gun channels started bringing up, like, hey, why don't we just go start reestablishing channels on Pornhub? They're very obviously First Amendment friendly, and they have no interest in banning anything, no matter how weird and perverse and crazy it looks. But I mean, my kind of inward hope is that as the forces that want to contain our liberty on all fronts, all facets, as they continue to push, it pushes more and more people to our way of thinking, where it's like, it doesn't matter if you're a gun owner or not. It doesn't matter if you're a First Amendment, a Fourth Amendment, a Fifth Amendment advocate, or Second Amendment advocate. If you advocate for the government to stay out of your rights and stay out of your life and leave you alone to manage your own destiny as you see fit, then we should all be on the same side. Like, I'm not a gamer. I haven't been in probably 10 years. And it's just because I have other things that occupy my time and my attention. But if the government wanted to pass a law tomorrow, like ruling over what games could be produced, I'd raise holy hell about it, because that's an obvious violation of people's right to choose for themselves what game they want to play, the manufacturers and developers' right to produce what they want to produce. Like, to me, it's like, what we need to do is we need to shift people off of the dogma and towards the principles. Like, if the principle is liberty and freedom, then we should all be on the same side of that. We just have to get people to stop looking at this in terms of, well, that's guns, so it's different, or that's violent video games, so that's different, and start saying, no, the real question is, does the government have the right to tell you can't do it? Because if they don't, then we're on the same side all of a sudden.
Yeah. Part of the other thing too is the industry, our side, attacked video games, and in doing so, it cost the licensing. It used to be you could play a game and you'd have, the Glock, you'd have the FN, you'd have all these brands named, and people would go out and buy these guns, and these companies help design the games. They help give the specs for the guns, and building that partnership, I think, is going to be huge if we can get that back between our industry and the game industry in terms of how the games are made, so that we can have our guns back. That's amazing.
Yeah, totally agree. Phil, was there any stories that you absolutely wanted to cover?
I mean, I guess I could be a total jerk and we could talk about the Alabama bill that would have men shooting blanks.
Yes, do it.
I mean, it's my body, my choice. But when it's men, then it's okay for the government to force them to get a vasectomy. Am I reading that correctly?
But wait, isn't it like mandatory vasectomies for men over 50 or that have more than 3 children or something like that?
Yes, that was what was proposed.
Like what? How? Is this real life? Is this actually being suggested? I mean, this is like Chinese communism type stuff.
Here's the thing, though. I truly don't believe that this bill was proposed in good faith. I think it's probably meant to make a point about abortion. And that's like its own hot button issue that we could debate for hours and days and weeks and years. However, I really think this is like an incredible bit of trolling that this law got proposed. It's like the same, wasn't it a conservative, I think it was a state hate matter that got proposed sometime last year, where a person tried to pass a bill that basically took like this whole list of gun control laws, and everywhere where the word firearm or gun was used, they substituted out like they basically changed the whole thing to be a media control bill. And as soon as the guy proposed it, like everyone in the media, all newspapers, everybody on the radio, they were screaming bloody murder about how you can't stop the free press, you can't stop people's right to free speech. And he was like, yeah, but here's a gun control bill that you proposed, and I changed all the word guns to media, and this is how you're reacting. And I see this as it on the other side of things. I really think this was suggested just to troll the other side.
Actually, yeah, it looks like I read this. It says that it's to help, it's to neutralize the abortion ban bill. So you're right on that one. But I only read the headline, which I know so many Americans are guilty of. And I was like, what? This doesn't make any sense.
Oh, it's it's a brilliant bit of what I refer to as like guerrilla politics, where you suggest something that has nothing to do with what you're after, just to get people outraged about it, to bring attention to the thing you want attention brought to.
Yeah.
If we could figure out how to do that with anti-gun bills, we'd be in business.
I don't know that we should use like this system for trolling people. I guess I feel like that's irresponsible at best.
Here comes somebody from the other side of the aisle, though, Sean, because I'm the person who identifies himself the way I do. But I've said for years we've been losing the culture war in the gun community because we've been trying to play nice and play by the rules for way too long.
Yeah, that's true.
We've been polite. We've given the other side equal time and equal deference to make their case. We've let them have their say. We've played nice with the other side, and they haven't played nice with us. They cheated at the rules that they set for this debate, and that's why we're losing. So my point of view has now become one of whatever advances our cause, the Second Amendment. I don't care if it's sneaky, underhanded, dishonest, immoral. I don't care anymore. Whatever it takes to win this fight, we need to start doing it. And that's not going to be a popular sentiment amongst everybody, but that's just me calling it the way it is, because we are losing this fight. The simple fact that the other side has the power to friggin' to intimidate firearm owners into silence is evidence that we're losing the fight.
Yeah.
We're going to keep losing until we stop playing by the rules that we're the only ones playing by. We're the only ones playing by the rules, so we're losing.
Yeah, I say often, it's a battle of propaganda. We're not very good at it. We're getting better, but we need to accelerate our improvement.
It's time to study up on the way it's time to study our enemy's playbook, because whatever they're doing, it's winning.
Yeah.
It's the fact versus emotion argument. We always stick to the facts, which is great and all, but if you don't argue those facts well, that's the issue, and being nonpartisan, helps us, but it's your right to own a gun. It's theirs not to. And so the idea is, how do you get somebody who doesn't want to exercise their right, who doesn't want or care about that right, to not stomp on yours? And so that's where we have to do better in our argument. I agree. You can't just be complacent, because, if you just sit there and hold on to your guns and are quiet and be like, oh, it's like the hunters. Hunters don't care about the Second Amendment because they think it'll never affect them. And, there's a reason why a lot of bills are written to exclude hunters in a way so that you can not have them get upset. Because if you upset the hunters, it's a lot more gun owners that are coming after you.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I have talked about it before, maybe not on this show, but I got to see the most impressive turning of someone who was anti-gun that has probably ever existed in the universe. So my friend Jeremy, who's on my other show, We Like Shooting with Me, he's about 6'7", he's got the wingspan of a Mack truck. Like, he's just an enormous ogre that destroys everything that he touches. We were in Nashville, and we were at the NRA annual meetings a couple of years ago. Last time I was in Nashville, and we were at a bar, and we were hanging out with it was a bachelorette party. So there was a bunch of girls, and we were hanging out, and we were having fun, and just drinking, and we had just met them. We had no idea who they were, and they asked why we were there. We said for the NRA show, and I believe she was Canadian too. And she said, "Yeah, I don't like guns. They scare me. I don't understand why anybody needs guns." And she's probably about maybe 5'2", something like that. And Jeremy walks up and he towers over her, to where, she's like just looking straight up at this immense ogre of a man. And he says, "Because if I wanted to rape you, you couldn't stop me." And she was like, "Okay, I get it." And it's an awful thing to say, but I've never seen that paradigm shift in someone's eyes so much as I did that woman, because she realized that, that was the moment she realized there was no one else that was going to take care of her, that her safety was on her, and that no one else could do anything. And it was that force multiplier that she realized at that moment. She wasn't upset or anything. They ended up making out later that night, but it was just like, it was the first time I'd ever seen like that shift in somebody's belief system so quickly.
But what he did, though, was that he stopped. He abandoned trying to make a rational argument, and he made an emotional one. Because let's call it what it is. For the briefest moments, she was scared to death. Not probably that he was going to rape her right there in the bar in front of witnesses, but the thought was upsetting to her. And that's, I guess, what I'm saying. if the other side is having so much freaking luck convincing middle America and mom and pop that, like, if we don't ban the guns, we're all going to die because they're using emotional arguments, it's time to use emotional arguments.
Yeah, no, it worked.
It's time to point out the people who go to friggin' prison for friggin' like 5 or 10 years for friggin' some meaningless little gun crime, and they didn't harm anybody, and say that law is wrong because look what it did. Yeah. It broke this woman, it ruined her life, it sent her to prison. You know, what's her name that was in Virginia? Not Virginia, New Jersey.
Shanine Allen.
Shanine Allen.
Yes. Perfect example. There's a woman who, like, didn't try to hurt anybody, wasn't trying to commit any act of malice. She literally made a wrong freaking turn. She was going to go to prison for it. And there's no one that can tell me that's not an effective way to win the argument to say, if the law does this, the law is wrong.
Yeah. We
need to take a look at this law and we need to fix it, scrap it, get rid of it. But if the law did this to this woman, the law is wrong.
Yeah. 100% agree. We are over time, but Andrew, tell us about 2A Gaming and your work with the Second Amendment Foundation.
So 2A Gaming is an outreach program to try and get gamers more supportive of the Second Amendment. You know, you crunch the numbers of gamers who play games that involve firearms and vote actively. It's 48 million people. 70% of those generally are not voting for a pro-gun candidate. If we can just change that, that makes a huge difference. As well as, you know, helping our side understand the games more, learning, you know, look, this isn't what causes violence. You know, we had, after El Paso, we were able to talk to the White House and let them know, look, you're going down the wrong path with this. You're going to upset a lot of people. Do your research first. And that helped a lot. But the idea is connecting with streamers, because so many people are watching people play video games, talking with them, having people from the industry on, the firearms industry, gaming industry, to talk about whether it be design of firearms, firearm safety, training, latest products coming out, just anything really, just to try and get gun owners to be more vocal of that we exist.
That's awesome. I said Andrew, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Last week, I think I was reading an article about 2A Gaming and I literally just scanned over it and said, your dad's name, right?
Yep.
Cause I'm an idiot. No, but I think that's awesome. Like and you know what? We're running long, but whatever. We'll do what we want. How do you get them to understand? Like, how do you get them to realize these things? Like, do you have strategies yet, or are you guys kind of still building those strategies?
So it's always been my belief, especially with the Second Amendment, is there is literally a place for everybody. And like you were talking about in the bar, one of the parts of the Second Amendment is self-defense. That is huge. That is one of the reasons why people support it, is the idea of protecting their home and their family and their property.
Yeah.
Another one, you know, my wife is not pro-gun. We went to TriggerCon last year. She got to shoot, and she came out of TriggerCon wanting to build an AR. Because she's like, I can do this. I can build one. This is awesome. I want to show her Cerakoting, you know, and it's amazing what you can do. And so there you have the competitive target side of it. And that's where I am. You know, I like blinking. I like 22s. They're cheaper. It's fun. I'm a competitive person, especially with the gaming. I'm more interested in hitting a target. That's what gets me. And then you have hunting, you know, people who have guns for their livelihood, survival. And there's literally, you know, anyone you talk to, there's something that you can find in the Second Amendment, in the firearm community, that they will be interested in and actually enjoy. And you can get them on our side just by finding that one little thing. NSSF has a great program. I think it's like First Shot, you know, taking somebody shooting. You take somebody shooting for the first time, it is amazing how much their perspective will change. You know, if it's something you don't have experience with, you really can't judge it. You're not able to have an opinion of it. And so we found with the video games, so many people play these shooter games, as they're called, first person shooters. And that is like their first and only interaction with firearms. So how do you get somebody who is comfortable with firearms? You know, you have kids that know about World War II firearms that you couldn't even find in museums these days because they're destroyed. They know how to work firearms really well, yet they've never shot one before. So how do you get them to go to translate, you know, from this game, go shooting, find the real gun, learn the safety, learn your rights, so that they want to protect it? Because look, you enjoy this game, that is what you are talking about banning. And eventually, I mean, we've seen it. That's where things go. It's a culture thing. So how do you grow the Second Amendment community? How do you get younger? How do you get more diverse so that it's protected?
Yeah. How do people get involved and find out more information?
So basically we're streaming. I think it's Monday, Wednesday, Friday is when we're doing it. Mainly on Facebook, Facebook Live. It's just facebook.com/2AF Gaming. I think if you search for 2A Gaming, it should come up. Also on Twitch at 2A Gaming. You know, it's the bigger gamer one. It's more towards the younger audiences. I do both at the same time. You know, and it's just come watch, come comment. Big thing is the more people that comment, the more people push you in the algorithms, and that's how it grows.
Awesome. Andrew, pleasure to meet you, man. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Phil, where can people find you? What's new?
Nothing much. Same old. Matter of Facts podcast. You can find us on Facebook, mofpodcast.com. Getting some work done on the sequel to my book. I don't make any promises when they'll come out, but it is actually back in production, and I'm up to like 67,000 words. I had a good burst of productivity recently. Now I'm just trying to get that book up over the finish line and off to the editor so I can find out if I actually have more than one book in me or not. I mean, the first one was pretty well received. I was impressed. But like you said the other day on your other show, I mean, there's a ton of pressure to follow up one decent book with another one so I can see if I actually have it in me to continue to be an author or if it was just one really good book.
Well, Jeremy Posderick from We Like Shooting got the book after you were on our show and got the audiobook and listened to it like in a day, I think, something like that, and said he loved it. So that's high praise coming from a man who doesn't like anything.
I'll take that as high praise then.
And that's American Insurgent, available on Amazon in both audiobook and Kindle. And is it paperback as well?
Yep, paperback as well.
All right, very cool. Guys, that's going to do it for tonight. Leave us some feedback on Facebook, YouTube, whatever it happens to be. You can find this show in iTunes, Google Podcasts, wherever. I guess it's Apple Podcasts now. Wherever fine podcasts are served, go check out these guys and all the great stuff that they're up to. Don't forget to check out the Patriot Patch Company and Second Call Defense. That's firearmsradio.tv/SCD, as well as patriotpatch.co. This Week in Guns is produced by Kenny Ortega and Ben Allreed, and is a production of the Firearms Radio Network. We'll catch y'all next week.